I'm Dr. Julie Schaefer, and I'm here today with Erin Matlock. Erin and I are good friends, and Erin is a global mindset coach, author, artist, professional speaker on suicide, and the founder of the Brain Summit. Welcome, Erin.
Thank you
Um,
so much.
she and I, Erin did a Worth It a class a number of years ago, and which I attended, and I thought it was just a great class. And so I invited Erin on today to talk about feeling like you're worth it, which is very important in relationships. And I thought we'd start there with why it's so important to feel like you're worth it in to have a successful relationship.
Great question. The thing about our self-worth is that we do truly create our own reality. So our joy, our passion, our fulfillment in life, our happiness, our success are all directly related to our level of self-worth. And if we don't heal the issues from childhood that cracked that self-worth, if we don't grow that self-worth to what's deemed as a healthy capacity, then we have a tendency to either attract the wrong partners. We could have a long history of attracting the wrong partners, or we could have the right partner, but we continue to have struggles and dissatisfaction, fighting, resentment in our relationships. And so that's the reasons we really need to go back and figure out what happened, what do we need to heal to come into any kind of relationship or to interact in our current relationship in a way that is complete and whole.
Yeah, that's so important. And those old wounds, those hurts from the past, just there can be so insidious. They're sometimes hidden from us. It can be very hard to see what the problem is and to know how to heal it. So, how do you talk to people about identifying what the problem is?
There's really two ways. We can either go back and take a look at childhood. We can take a look at when was the first time you felt betrayed by a parent? What was the ongoing dissatisfaction with a parent or a caregiver? All of us are put here as infants who are completely and totally dependent upon the caretaker or caretakers in our life. And I don't care how great of a parent someone is, no human can ever 100% meet the needs of another human 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there will be a feeling of lack, a feeling of anxious anxiety, a feeling of abandonment, uncertainty, and frustration with those who can't give us everything that we need. The other part of that is as we grow as children, there typically tends to be one parent that stands out, and maybe we don't speak the same language. Maybe the way they show love isn't the way we needed love to be shown to us. And maybe the way they speak to us is a way that we don't communicate. They have their own patterns, they have their own wounds from their childhood that then they are acting out with us as children. So we can take a look, and normally, especially if someone's listening to this or watching this right now, there is a caretaker, a caregiver in their life that is just lighting up in the brain. And I know there is for me too. The other piece of that is we can also look at the patterns. And that's something I do with my coaching clients quite a bit, is we look at what are the patterns you're coming in for? What are you frustrated with? What keeps happening? Who do you keep attracting? If you have someone who say, I attract the wrong men, or I attract unavailable men, or I'm attracted to unavailable men, or all men are jerks. You and I both know that's not true. And then ongoing, or if you're in a relationship with someone and you find that there's just fighting, maybe it's not anything wrong with the partner, but it's the same fight that you have over and over and over again. Those are the things that we look at to say, okay, those are unhealed. And so we have to understand that typically when we have an attraction to someone, that initial attraction, of course, is due to physical traits, sometimes a financial reality. There can be this balance of attractiveness, whether there's going to be reproduction issues. So we have that side of attraction, but we also have this unconscious side of attraction, that we are drawn to people who represent that caregiver who could not or did not meet our needs. That's the way we perceive it. So this person, even if we don't know why we're so attracted, why are we so into them, why can't we stop thinking about them? Because down the road, it's going to become very apparent. They are here to create those wounds again in order to give us a chance to heal them, to evolve, to work through them. So, for instance, if you had a parent who is very distant, whether it was just their makeup, their mental makeup, whether they were an alcoholic, whether they worked a lot, traveled a lot, whether there was a divorce and they physically just couldn't be there enough, then you're going to attract a partner who also, in some way, cannot give you the attention that you need. And that we create that whole reality for ourselves from our childhood. And in essence, it gives us a chance to make the realization, and this is everything, if you're going to heal these wounds, that we are responsible for meeting our needs. We are responsible for giving ourselves the attention. We are responsible for giving ourselves the affirmation and the permission to be who we are. So as we continue to seek out what a parent didn't give us, we're going to continue to have resentment, fighting, distancing. We might create passive aggressiveness in order to retain control. We may be codependents. I know I spent a whole lifetime as a codependent in relationships until I really understood what that was. So for instance, if we spent a childhood where we felt like we weren't being seen or heard, we couldn't count on that parent to be there for us in the way that we needed. So we felt insecure. And I think, Julie, you're going to talk later in the summit about attachment styles. And that's a whole really fascinating concept in itself. And so what happens then is we have partners who create that for us. We'll continue to have that. And like I said, for some of us, we become codependent. And what does that mean? Well, for me, I'll give you an example. It meant I was going to swallow all of this, either self-hatred or lack of self-worth, lack of self-respect, that I didn't matter enough, that I wasn't ever enough. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't small enough. I wasn't skinny enough. I wasn't like the other people who I thought got everything and got that attention. And so I could just drown that in someone else, take care of them, show up and be their savior, really consume my life around them and their needs, and make sure I was meeting everything and being that perfect person so that I was enough. And at the same time, as I was seeking that validation, and you're never going to get enough validation to feel enough from someone else. So you keep giving, and that builds anxiety, because if that person leaves, the thought of them leaving can create just intense panic, which can cause you to cling, to become needy, which can cause them to pull away. And the other piece of that is that you are never really addressing what's going on internally with you. And what the most important piece for me was in healing that codependency need, that need to just make someone else's life my own, was to be able to be with myself, love myself. As cheesy as that sounds, we have to learn how to love ourselves, respect ourselves. And I had to learn how to be single, be on my own, and be completely happy with that, meaning finding my own passions in life, digging into all of those wounds from my childhood and what happened to me, or what I perceived to have happened to me, and learning how to be just as happy and as involved in my life as anyone else's life. And that key, that took a while. I don't know about you, Julie. I know you see in your coaching practice, that's not something that happens overnight.
Right. No, we have to really be willing to take responsibility for our part in that dynamic. And that's a hard thing to do because what we end up seeing is all of the ways that we're getting it wrong, which initially makes us feel even worse, right? But with some willingness to examine that pattern and say, okay, well, this is my contribution. This is, I have this need, and this is how I'm trying to fill it, is really how we get to a place where we can start to make those changes and heal those wounds. I, for one, think it's really important to do that work with someone else who's pretty stable and grounded and not try to just go out on your own. Yeah, of course, we're saying go out on your own emotionally away from the relationship in this example, but with a trusted coach, mentor, therapist, somebody um, to kind of help you along the way, so that that you know that you're seeing things clearly rather than making stuff up, because you've been making stuff up for so many years at that point. Yeah. So often we get caught in these patterns and then we think all men are jerks or whatever, right? And we've run into a number of examples that made us feel bad. And so then we start categorizing all men as being that way. And I think men probably do that to women too. Um, how do you break that pattern? What do you what, how have you done that, or what do you suggest other people do?
So that's a really interesting question. I am very fortunate. And then in my history, I don't have the all men are jerks. I have several friends who have that. I have a history of attracting really good men into my life. My crux was, why am I not worthy of a man's love? Why won't they stay? So in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, and I'm going to address the all men are jerks thing because I have a few friends who are going through that right now. But in my mind for this, so if anyone else is this is their issue, it was, they're nice guys, they're great guys, they're great on paper, but they don't stay. None of them stay. And then I went to, oh, I chase all of them away, or I can't keep a man, any of these things. And we start to label ourselves. And so the more that we do that, the more that we label, the more that we focus on something, the more that we decide this is a rule, well, then that also becomes our reality. Now we've created a filter that we see the world through. And so we are more apt to pick up cues that reinforce those beliefs, meaning,
Yeah.
see, they never leave. See, he was a jerk. See, he only wants to date younger women. He won't date his own age group. See. And what we're missing is 99% of the time, all of the good things, right? That in our case, because I'm speaking as a heterosexual, so I'm speaking of men, but it could be of women, it could be of any any human being. We're missing all of those because those don't reinforce our insecurities. They don't reinforce our lack of self-worth, and they don't set off that amygdala, which I call my amygdala the screamer, because it likes to just and go into this anxiety response. With mine, so what I did, I actually had gone through a couple of breakups in a row, and I had just had it, and I was just on the floor and in such grief. And sometimes it takes us falling to the floor and the pain being so great, that we finally decide to fix something. And to your point earlier, Julie, I absolutely concur. I could not fix this one on my own. I couldn't see. And as much training as I've had and as many clients as I worked with, I couldn't see. All I could see was every man leaves, every man leaves. And there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And I'm never going to have that normalcy. And by the way, I mean, my parents are married over 50 years. So it's not even that I witnessed divorce in my home. I didn't. It is definitely was internal to me. So I crawled myself to a weekend workshop with trained instructors, and I didn't know anybody. And I had several friends who were concerned. It was supposed to be an intense workshop, and they thought I was too fragile. And I appreciate that because I was in grief. Julie, you saw me during that time. I
Mhm.
mean, we
Mhm.
talked extensively. It was bad. And I went to this workshop, and it was very painful because if you're ever in that part, you've been through a loss in a relationship and your heart is just fractured, shattered, and you
Yeah.
can't really hardly breathe.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and it's so raw. And I was just crying the whole time. I was the crier. And I was listening because I wanted to learn. I needed the answer and I was ready to hear it. And I was going through the exercises and I just felt like, I don't know if this is going to work for me. I don't know. And the next day, I raised my hand after talking to my mother on break, and she said, "How's it going?" And I said, "It's okay, but I don't know if I'm really gonna get fixed from this." And she just said, "Well, how does it work?" And I told her, and we had these groups and sessions and classes, and then you could go up to the front and the instructor could work with you. And she said, "Well, have you gone up to the front?" And of course I said, "Well, no, because in my head I was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I was afraid of getting it wrong. What is getting it wrong when you're going to a self-help workshop? You're there for help. So I got past all of those things in my head, and I raised my hand and I went to the front, and the instructor worked with me. And the exercise was interesting because she said, what are all the tears about?" And I said, "I don't understand why I'm not worthy of a man's love. And I don't understand why they always leave." So she had me go to the board, and we started to brainstorm all of these things that I thought were the reason that happened, which means what was wrong with me. And
Mhm.
I wrote all of these concepts on the board that were floating in my head my entire life. And she worked through an exercise with me where she, just like you do, just like I do with my clients, we really take a look at, is that true? And she looked at each one of these negative thoughts I had about myself, and is that true? And none of them were true. There was always a different view for, you know, what happened with all of these men in my life to cause the breakup. And it was interesting because at the end she said, "What I need you to do is I need you to erase all of those concepts of what's wrong with you. Too tall, too fat, too old, too not successful enough, not pretty enough, I have a hot head, and I have I'm a passionate temper." All these things I'd written up there, she wanted me to erase. And I didn't want to erase them. I didn't tell anyone. Um, and so I erased really slowly, really slowly. And I was up there crying because, again, I was the crier. And I was erasing all these concepts. And I got to the end and everybody clapped for me because at that point, I was supposed to let all of this go and come with a clean slate of how to learn about why I was attracting, why I was pushing them away, how they didn't leave. I shoved them out the door and then created a reality in my head that all men leave. Well, you would leave too if you went through what I put you through, right? And I was doing that to prove to myself, to stay congruent with my childhood wounds, that I wasn't worthy of constant attention, love, security, attachment from a caregiver. And after that, we had a break. We did a little bit more training, go through a break.
Mhm.
And we were going to lunch. And this is the end of the story, but it's such an important part. And I had a line of people, there are about 150 of us in this workshop, line up. And the women would always come up and they would say that, "Thank you, that was me, that's me, that was me." And the guys would come up, and all different ages of guys. And it was really interesting because we don't always see that emotional release from guys, right? They have this
Yeah.
wall that unfortunately we as society have placed on them. And they would come up like, "Thank you. I had no idea." And each one of them had either an ex-wife or an ex-girlfriend. And it wasn't always the most recent one, but it was that one who stood out that haunted them, that they couldn't figure out. Like sometimes we, especially in our youth, we have that one where we're like, that just wrecked me. And every one of them said, "I had no idea what she was thinking. I had no idea why she did that, why she started those fights, why she wouldn't, return my calls, why she created the distance, which is the way we regain power. We think we regain power. And so many of them went to go call or reconnect, not to get back together with these people, because some of them were remarried and all these things. They said, I have to let them know that I saw them, that I heard them, that I understand, and that this is going to make it so much easier for me now, even in my current relationship, to know what's going on in my partner's mind, so that then we can start to calm things down when they go into the red zone. And instead of playing this power struggle game, we can work through it via communication. And each one of them said, I loved how slowly you erased all of those concepts, that self-hatred. And I remember over and over again, it was like they would tell me, we could tell you really wanted to make sure you got it. And that wasn't it at all. I erased them so slowly because I didn't want to let go of them. That was my armor. That was my protection, because I wasn't taught in school, just like we are still not taught in school appropriately. And we can't expect our parents to know how to deal with people, truly deal with people, how to identify how we're going to be in a relationship, how to communicate in relationship, so that we don't expect, especially us girls, man, we love to think those men are going to read our minds. They cannot read our minds, and we cannot get mad at them for it. Trust me, I've tried. And
Right.
and that was the key to that, is I knew that I was erasing slowly because I didn't want to let go, which meant I had a lot of work to do, because now I had to stand naked in front of the next man and actually show him who I was and communicate with him, talk to him like an adult, and express my needs for the first time, instead of expecting him to meet my needs without even knowing what they are. And when he didn't, resenting him and creating all of this distance and stress. And so, going back to what you said, how did I heal it? I sought help, is what I did, because I couldn't see it. And I opened myself to the fact that maybe I didn't know how to fix myself and heal what I needed to be healing. And then the other part of that was to actually follow through and not go back, because we are going to revert back to some of our old ways. It's just naturally in us. And to be able to recognize that and stop in the moment and then communicate, right, our
Yeah.
needs to that person next to us. Here's why. Did I flew off the handle? I'm so sorry. Let me just share a little bit about why that might happen. And if you could kind of be along with me, I can give you a way that helps us snap out of that the next time it happens.
Right, right. Being able to recognize your patterns is so important, and it's so hard to see it because I if you're in the forest, it's you see the trees, but you don't see the whole entire forest, right? So you need somebody outside the forest to say, "Hey, you're in a forest." And
Sure.
you're you're gonna get it wrong again and again because it's an old pattern that you've been playing on repeat for so long that you've lost track of when it actually started most of the time. Yeah,
Exactly it.
yeah,
Just
yeah.
auto.
And I really liked what you said about putting on the filter, because we develop these internal sort of beliefs and fears about who we are, and about who other people are. And then any little thing that could be construed that way, we often kind of spin it in our heads to mean that.
Mhm.
And we don't stop to think, oh, well, maybe it doesn't really mean that. Maybe it means um, that maybe he didn't call me back right away, or she didn't call me back right away because it means he or she was busy. And then we later learned that, yeah, they had a bit of an emergency and would have called if they had the time. But we don't really explore what happened there. We just assume that what, what we assume something that is more consistent with this fear that we have that we're not worth it. And it happens all the time. Um,
So true, Julie.
yeah.
I had one, and I think other people will get this. The toilet seat. Right? I had one partner, a great, awesome partner, and but he would leave the toilet seat up, but only sometimes. I mean, this is how rigid I was with the, and this is why you've got to love yourself enough to deal with the self-worth piece. And I had convinced myself, I had this set of rules that if a man did this, it was because I wasn't pretty enough. And if I was Giselle, supermodel Giselle, then he wouldn't dare do that. And I mean, nobody can convince me otherwise. And I would just get so mad, and this toilet seat was up. And I was thinking, and I had to catch myself and say, Erin, it's ridiculous because this lovely man actually puts the toilet seat down for you the majority of the time, which is really kind because we're both using the facilities. And also, is it true? Go back to Byron Katie. Is it true that if you were Giselle and then you all were together day in and day out and day in and day out, that he wouldn't ever forget to put the toilet seat down? And it was very hard because that whole essence of myself wanted to say, no, he wouldn't. He wouldn't. He would just for me, and because I'm not good. And it was this line of thinking, and I had to catch it and I had to counter it. And then I had to breathe into the fact that it's time to let that go. And the other part for me, especially in relationships, is to say, let's pick something out that I do that irritates him. And let me ask myself why I do that is because I don't think he's hot enough, successful enough, great enough. And none of those things ever enter my mind when I do the things or I did the things that might have irked him. We all know what irks our partners, especially when we
Yes.
live together. And so that kind of work really helped, but it's a lot of coming face to face with yourself and just dropping all that armor, because that whole line of thinking of I'm not enough, and see, it's true. He is a jerk because he left the toilet seat open, which is not true, allowed me to, again, create distance, create resentment, create strife in my relationships to prove to myself that no man stays, they all leave.
I love that story because when I don't know if you've gotten enough distance from it, but it's kind of it's one of those things that at the end of the day it doesn't have a lot of weight on it, leaving the toilet seat up, and yet we become so like attached to that.
Yes.
And it's almost an irony where you're getting angry about this little thing that doesn't really have any meaning whatsoever. Rather than picking something that might have some meaning, you know. Um, yes, I've had conversations with people about how you put your spoons and forks in the dishwasher, and it
Yeah.
becomes a real point of contention. And but you know what? The beauty of that is like if you can take a step back and see that it's a little thing, you can examine why you're having that reaction. You can see that, oh, this is coming from me. If you can get just a little bit of distance from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then it kind of becomes a little bit of a signpost. Oh, there I'm in my pattern again. Looky here it is. Yeah. Yep. Um, so we often though end up in relationships that are good, but not great. You know, they're not like we're sort of settling. We put up with a lot. Um, and we do it because we think if we were to really express ourselves and really show who we are, the person will leave us and we're afraid of that loneliness, that thing that'll come after the relationship is over, that grief. And, you know, just from your description of your own experience with that, grief is like devastating, um, and it shatters you. And nobody wants to go through that. So often we'll stay in those relationships to avoid the idea that we might go through that. And since you've been through that, like what would you say to somebody who's settling?
So I would say a couple of things. Um, yeah. Everything you just said, Julie, is right. You've been through it. I've been through it. Anyone who's watching us has probably been through it. It is not easy to go through grief like that. And the thought of going through it will absolutely keep us in places where we are completely dissatisfied or numb. And the thought goes down to, what do you want out of life? And what is that life going to look like for you? And if it doesn't include the person in your relationship, and perhaps because this person is very bad for you, you know, that you could be an abusive relationship, you could be an emotionally abusive relationship, you could be with someone who is distant, manipulative. And then on the flip side, you could be with someone who's really great, but is not for you, she's not for you. And in that, I think it takes great courage to make a decision to leave that type of relationship. And in that, I would suggest there be planning, meaning
Mhm.
who is your support system? Who
Mm.
are the people in your life right now who have the means, the capacity to help you through this? Because who it was last year may not be this year. Right? Who knows what we're all going through? And what are the things you have in your life that can create such joy or such passion, such interest for you that even though you may not feel intense joy during the leaving period, during the mourning period, the regrouping period, you have to have something that pulls your attention so that you can immerse yourself in that healing. Because those first 3 months, those are the months everything is so raw, it's difficult.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, is future pacing, to say, okay, I know those first 3 months are going to be rough, so I'm going to have my calendar, I'm going to know what it is. I remember for me, I had moved into my own place. I had moved out of a relationship, out of a home that was shared, and it was just very difficult for me to get out. I'm quite introverted anyways, and being out in the world didn't feel good for me. So I would force myself to go to the home store, go to some type of store, to pick up something that would be to decorate the new place. It was took me months to unpack my boxes where I moved, because I just couldn't handle the reality that this was my new life. So those are the things that we have to do. We have to set up instances where we push ourselves forward and understand that it is going to feel bad for some of that time. However, looking back, and I can look back on those instances in my life, I wouldn't be where I am. I wouldn't be as happy as I am. I wouldn't be as okay with myself as I am had I not done that. And the issue is are you going to continue in the pain because it's what you know and you're scared of it being worse? Or are you actually going to stand up for yourself and love yourself enough to, yes, maybe go through some initial pain in order to have what you never thought you could have the relationship you want, have the career you want, have the body you want, have the home you want, whatever your goals are, you're not getting them, and you're not going to sustain them if you do get some of them. If your core life, which is your relationship, I mean, that's the person who has the biggest influence on all of your energy, on all of your outlook, on all of your reality. If that person, if that relationship isn't the one you're supposed to be in.
Right. Yeah. I think facing that, as daunting as it is important to do a couple things. It's to look beyond that, like what's going to be beyond the first 3 months, and how am I going to take care of myself during that time, and where am I headed for? Um, and bring with it, as you were telling that, to kind of answering the question, I was thinking, you need a lot of self-compassion for yourself during this time. You might be having thoughts like, oh, well, I got myself into that relationship. How can I do that to myself? If the relationship was abusive or manipulative in some way. And just being able to say, um, this is where I'm at and I can't do much. I mean, my story, my husband and I had been kind of in this relationship where I was settling for the longest time, a long, long time. And I was in the process of leaving him when he got sick and passed away. And then I was like, left here with this, well, why did I do that to myself? Why was I in that relationship so long? And I had to bring a lot of self-compassion to that conversation I was having with myself, because it was too overwhelming to think that I might have just ruined my entire life by being in that relationship. And I haven't ruined my entire life. And on the other side of that, things are good. And that self-compassion was an important component. So when you go into this, kind of identify what it is you're going into it for and who you want to be on the other side, and then hold your own hand through it. Very important. Have some self-compassion for what you're going through.
Self-compassion is the key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's very important.
For someone who might be watching thinking, I don't even know where to start, I say let's step away unless you're in imminent danger in a relationship. Then we need you out. We need you in a safe place. But if you're just in something that's over, or the marriage is over and you both know it, or the relationship isn't right, or it's not the right person, but you don't want to hurt them, start with yourself. Start with the smaller things on building self-compassion and self-love and self-worth. All of these things don't come overnight. These are huge pieces of your life. And if you're grown up like Julie and I, when we were dealing with all of this, you've got decades of work to undo. So it starts with smaller things. I think in my case, that's what helped me, is what would nurture me, and finding a way to move to the next best positive feeling, what could feel good in the moment. And what I mean by that is, what does this blanket feel like around me? I'm really big on bathtubs. So I'm big on getting in the bathtub. You change your state to something positive, and you start doing these very kind things for yourself. And it doesn't seem like it's going to work, because you think, well, what good is a bath going to do? I mean, that feels good for a minute, but it's not going to fix all the things that I've done to my life to get where I am right now. But the answer is it does do that, because we have to stack these smaller habits of self-care and self-love. We have to stack the awareness, the ability to have awareness of all of those negative thoughts, all of those ideas that we're not worth it, and that the other people are all this way and they're all like this and they want this and they'll never want me. These things we build. So we build on that awareness, and then we build on a counter argument to it. For instance, let me give you an example. I have some friends, they're at an age now where they think men their age are only interested in much younger women. And um, one of the problems is a lot of these women are on dating apps. And I think dating apps can be a difficult place depending on your gender and your age and all of that, because they don't really reflect any bit of reality, especially for those of us who are truly grown. When you meet someone and chemistry arises, um, that's you're in a place where, I mean, I think I've met one of my longtime partners at a 4-year-old's birthday party, and neither one of us had kids. So it's a very different experience than if he or I was just going through swiping on an app, looking at people we probably never would have met. So in that case, then with some of my girlfriends, it's a matter of, well, these men just want these women this age. And so then I have to lie about my age. And I think that's an awful thing, because you're setting something up with a lie from the beginning. And you're also people pleasing from the beginning. You're lying about an age on an app to get the attention of men who aren't out in the real world meeting you. They're probably out in the real world doing real world stuff, but this is where you want them to meet you. So in that, it's that counterattack to say, do all men my age just want younger women? No. And so let's start making the case for that. Let's start looking, really looking through an unfiltered lens of the world to say, are all the men on dates in this restaurant with 20-year-olds? Nope, they're not. But do you typically come away from that restaurant and saying, oh, I can't stand that place because, all the men are jerks and they all date these 20-year-olds? Because I've heard that from a friend of mine. And the thing is I've seen that restaurant, been in that restaurant, and it's not true. That's not true. That's her filter reinforcing this belief that there are no good men her age who want her because she's not good enough because she hit a certain age. And she will
Yeah.
swear up and down that that reality is true. And yet I have a completely different experience with men, and she and I are only a couple years apart. So we're talking about the same age group of men, and I'm seeing plenty of men dating plenty of women their own age, and I'm having no problem with that in myself. So again, it's two different filters, two different lenses that we're looking through. That's the practice, I think, as we start to build self-worth, self-esteem. That's the responsibility we have, is to say, how am I making life so hard for myself? How am I making life lonely? How am I making life just unfulfilling? How am I looking at it? And could I look differently at the world? And I will tell you, sure you can, but you're going to be disappointed, right, Julie? Like as soon as we start to have a different viewpoint on life, or we start to train for a new habit, there are always a few setbacks. So
Always.
right?
Always.
And then you're going to say, nope, see, I was right and they were wrong. And this is just how it is. And then we get to go back into that feeling, that protective armor, that unhealthy protective armor that keeps us in a place where we are not truly happy, free, respected, and loved. So remember that too, is you're going to have a couple of setbacks. They don't have to be major, that are going to attempt, and this is how our beautiful universe attempts to challenge us when we're healing these old wounds. It's going to give us reasons to go back to the old wounds and stay there, and instead say, you know what, tonight I really met a bunch of jerks, but that doesn't mean that they're all jerks. And so tomorrow I'm going to get back out there. And by get back out there, I don't mean go, you have to be dating all the time. I simply mean experience this world in a way where we see our desired mates, since that's what we're talking about here, whoever they may be, whatever gender they may be, in the best possible light, so that we may train our minds to look for their best attributes, those wonderful features, all of the good as a whole. And what that will do is create a reality for ourselves where we see that there are plenty of people who will be awesome for us and love us and take care of us and be trustworthy and be honest with us and loyal, so that we can create a fulfilling, everlasting relationship.
Yes. And I think, we've been talking a lot about the scenario of either contemplating leaving a relationship or being single and looking for somebody. But I also run into the situation where we're in a kind of a dissatisfying relationship. We were in love at one point, but now we're not so much, or we're kind of bored. It's dissatisfactory in some way. And I think there's a lot somebody can do just within the relationship in that case to um, work on themselves and confront the fears that are holding them in place without necessarily having to do that by leaving the relationship. And it can be kind of interesting when you start opening up, expressing yourself, and even letting your partner see that, being brave, having that courage to let your partner see this new aspect of you, and ask for what you want. maybe within the relationship, and have your partner go, "Oh, I would love that too." And you're like blown away. I've had clients do that and be just absolutely blown away. They just assumed that as soon as they asked for this thing that they wanted, their partner was going to ditch them. And that, it doesn't matter whether you've been dating for 3 months or been in a marriage for, 15 years. Um, People get scared of that. If I change, my partner won't love me anymore. And I think that there's a lot of relationships out there where there is room for that movement. The partner would like, it'd be like a breath of fresh air in the relationship, and actually possibly give your partner an opportunity to do something similar. So we can do it as a single person. We can do it as somebody who's in a relationship we really need to leave, and we can do it in a relationship that's just gone stale, and we need to sort of spice up by bringing our true selves to the relationship. Yeah.
And to speak to that, Julie, it's you think about um, every one of us grew up and we were children and we had these big dreams, and maybe those dreams have changed because we've gotten older and we have different interests, but we all had them. And sometimes when we get into a long-term relationship or a marriage, we give up a lot of those dreams, a lot of our individuality, not because we have to. It's because we choose to, and we choose to put ourselves last. We choose to make sacrifices. Maybe we needed to become a parent. We needed to put
Mhm.
the children first for a while until they became more independent. And I speak to so many people who have lost touch with what those dreams were. I mean, you get into that relationship and it is a little bit numb or it's a little bit stale, and you forget who you are and you forget who you were. And sometimes those layers of numbness are so thick, it's hard to remember what you ever wanted. It's hard to remember how crazy and fun you were, and the chances you used to take, and the risk you used to take, and all of these wonderful things. And I think that that is a killer for relationships. And one of the reasons we see when the kids leave the nest, we see so many divorces or separations, because these two people who were attracted to each other initially, when their eyes were wide open and the world was ahead of them, have made such sacrifices to each other, to the family, that a lot of those initial two people have been lost. And the thing that you can do that I think is one of the most self-loving things is to find yourself again. And Julie, when you talked about what this will do to the other partner, it will light them up because they need it too. So finding that passion that you have, and that lost passion, or a passion you never knew existed, taking the class you always wanted, traveling where you wanted to go, even if it's alone, taking risks that you wouldn't take before. These are the things that bring you back to that wholeness, that completeness of the human you were before we had to grow up, become adults, and the world got really heavy. So to re-energize a relationship or a marriage, and that's one of the keys is, and again, it doesn't have to be, oh, me and my partner, we're doing this together. This is about you. It takes one person to make these changes to see the changes in the partner. And I've seen it just open up a whole release of that kind of cloudy tension that's in a relationship, that dissatisfaction, especially when you're watching social media and so many people are starting over and they're freshly in love, or they're on the dating apps, or they're going on a first date, first kiss, and that's been 20, 10, 15, 30 years for you. It can look a little bit like you don't have a great relationship anymore, or that maybe you settled, when that's probably not true. It's simply a matter of, who are you? Where are you? Where did you go? And let's find you again. And the more you do that, the more you come out, the more you show yourself that you can go after these dreams, the more exciting and fulfilling that relationship after 20, 30, 40, 50 years will be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, I think we're about at a place where we should wrap this up. do you have any like final thoughts, or you want to sum something up after this whole conversation? It felt very wide ranging.
That's how Julie and I are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I we could go hours and hours. We spent years talking about behavior and relationships. We're both fascinated by them. I would
Yeah.
tell anybody, and first, Julie, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. And for doing this, what you're doing, this event. It's a big undertaking, and you're going to help a lot of people. But for anyone listening who's thinking she could do it because, and separating yourself from me or from Julie or for anyone else in your circle of friends who have maybe made a change in their life that you're afraid to make or think you can't make, I would tell you this is that I don't know what really created in me such a lack of self-worth. I have two loving parents. They're still together. They're still alive. I'm very fortunate. I mean, there are reasons. There are certain reasons we would need another hour because of the work I've done. I can go back and look. But the fact is that to go through life and have such low self-esteem, low sense of self-worth, low sense of self-love, and really up until my 40s, not get it, not understand how to fix it, why it's happening, was excruciating and it was maddening. It created issues with my weight. It created issues with my skin. It created issues in how I work and what the outcome of my work was. But ultimately, I was living a life that looked very good on the outside and was very miserable on the inside. And if you're like me, you can keep going with that for a long time and nobody would even know. But there's a point, and I have to ask you, where what's going to be worth it to you? For me, I got tired of being so mad at everybody for having easier lives than I did. And did they? No. but you couldn't have convinced my mind. I got tired of everybody else getting what I wanted. And I got tired of seeing people just breeze through life, having things, and me getting left behind, and then working my buns off just to try to prove to everybody that I deserve to breathe. And I think it comes down to that is, are you tired enough of what you've put up with your entire life that you're ready to put yourself absolutely first? And that concept of, especially for those of us who are women, because we are taught not to, because we are being prepared for motherhood. Julie and I didn't become mothers. We're dog moms.
Yeah.
But we grow up being prepared for motherhood, and everybody else comes first, and make sure everybody else is taken care of. That's what I would tell you, is that when you're tired enough of how life has been and you're ready for something, you're not going to all of a sudden feel worth it in your gut. It doesn't happen like that. That takes years. I'm still in the process, although I'm really far through it, still working on it. But what happens is that decision starts a brand new path. And that path is the most interesting path that you'll ever take. You will see people drop from life. You will see new people come in, and you will see renewed friendships, renewed relationships, and you will be challenged more than you've ever been challenged. But the thing is that if you can stand with the guilt of putting yourself first, that feeling, then what's on the other side of being okay with the guilt that you're coming first is absolute magic. And I can only tell you from my experience that you are 100% worth it.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Erin. It's been a good conversation about a very important topic. Um, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. My website's the best way, erinmatlock.com. And then you can also send me a direct email Erin at erinmatlock.com. That comes straight to me and does not go to an assistant or get lost in space.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to have this conversation with me today. Until next time, take care.